Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis, the Praise of Fly podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Telegram, and Facebook. And you can support me on Subscribestar, Buy Me a Coffee, and Locals. So today is my special birthday stream. This will be the end of the last full week of content for the next 2 weeks of July. I'll be taking it a bit easier, cooling off from how busy June was and getting sick in May. But then we'll get back to our normal. I'll get back to my normal programming in July 3rd, the third week of July, and we'll be back to normal. So there'll be a bit of a reduced content production for the next 2 weeks after this. This is my brother. He's the first time he's made an appearance on the show. So if you've read my Substack, you've noticed that you might have noticed that some of my articles, he's edited some of them. So if you've read my articles on Substack, chances are you've seen some of his work. Why don't you say hello, Tyler?
Hi, everybody. My name's Tyler. It's fun to be on the show right now.
Yeah, it's nice to have you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Now, the thing is that today I thought, this is a really good way to get some more engagement with the audience with regards to just the channel in general. So the first thing I'll say is, this is an AMA, so you guys can do whatever you want. But as people funnel in and the crowd gets bigger and bigger, we'll begin with reading some questions that I ask people to give me on my YouTube community. And then anybody in the chat, of course, priority will be given to super chats. If you want to make sure I read what you have to say, that's the best way to do that. So we have in the chat today, Euthanasia, LaSure, Barry Highlander, Chase Harrison, Stephen Malcolm, and Foxflaw. Thanks, everybody. All right, so we're going to begin with some questions that I got on my YouTube community. First one is Chase Harrison. Any plans to cover other works of revisionist historiography in the vein of Barnes? The intro to the Barnes trilogy lists a number of other authors that I found little info elsewhere about on YouTube. Are you familiar with the work of Mark Fisher? If so, could you just say a few words about your take on his concepts of capitalist realism and lost futures ontology? Video requests, Jake Rawlinson, Elul Scholar interview, Hermetics, the 2 episodes on Elul with him if you want to familiarize yourself with his perspective. Logos and your take on Veblen and key insights from his works. Thanks for making videos. Logos turned me onto your channel, and I found your videos to be an amazing blend of breadth of topic and depth of analysis in pretty much everything I've taken the time to listen to. That's a pretty awesome accomplishment. Well, thanks for the kind words, Chase. So there's a lot here. We'll start with your first question about history. I'm sure in time I'll cover other revisionist figures. I covered Barnes specifically first because of the easy accessibility of his 3 essays on the blackout and why so many of us in this sphere talk about, well, why is the truth so hard to find? Why is the truth so hidden? Well, because there's been an active conspiracy to suppress it. Ultimately, this conspiracy stems from the Rockefellers, as I discussed. But yeah, some of the others like Charles Beard or Charles Tansel and more, yeah, I could definitely see returning to this topic in the future, though I don't necessarily see in the immediate future. Mark Fisher is interesting. I read most of his capitalist realism. I can't really say anything about futurist ontology since I'm not familiar. What I thought capitalist realism was rather good. The concept that sort of sums it all up is it's easier to envision the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Capitalism's victory was inevitable. And so it leads to a kind of complacency. And my concept of technological realism, which could be restated in a very similar fashion, it's easier to envision the end of the world than the end of technology, and its technology's triumph was considered inevitable, is in part inspired by this distinction. So I think overall that's a very interesting perspective he brings to the table. I also liked how he talks about the over-bureaucratization of business and production in the book Capitalist Realism, and how it actually mirrors the kinds of inefficiencies seen in Stalinism, which the capitalist system was meant to be a superior, more efficient form of production in comparison to. As far as Jake Rawlinson and Hermetics, that sounds very interesting. I'll have to look more into their perspectives and work before I can give a more definite answer. Logos on Veblen, oh yeah, I'm sure he'd be down for that. I just have to make that happen. That shouldn't be too hard. So yeah, that's the first one. A little bit lighter fare, Foxflaw. Hope you have an awesome birthday. Thanks. Not a big brain question, but do you have any favorite video games? This is in your content while playing Elden Ring has been really enjoyable. Such a great speaker and criminally unknown. Again, thank you, Foxflaw, for your kind words. Yeah, so if you guys watched my appearance on Last Things, I mentioned how my entire life arc was fundamentally altered by Age of Empires sometime around 1998. And yeah, real-time strategy, turn-based strategy games were like my jam for like 20 years, from like 1998 to 2018. Games like Age of Empires, and then Age of Empires: Rise of Rome. I remember when those were new, so that's that tells you something. Age of Kings and Age of Kings Conquerors. I remember those. Great games. Also, really deep lore. There was the Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, which was based off the same engine as Age of Empires 2, which was really fun. And then, of course, the Civilization games, classic. I got the anniversary edition of Civilization 6 with artwork from all the previous games. That was fun. Yeah, and then there's a couple other lost lore games, like, for example, Call to Power 1 and 2. Those were fun as well. Not quite as well known as Civilization. So that's those were some of my favorite games. But Tyler, since you're here, why don't you weigh in on some of your favorite games?
Sure. Now, I noticed that you didn't really list anything modern. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Since you played something new.
Mm-hmm.
And games are tough. We're sort of in a long dark age with games right now, at least in my opinion, and in others. Games have been through a lot. There's sort of ulterior motives behind what makes a game good right now, and that affects a lot of the gameplay going into it, and a lot of people might not think that. But you mentioned Elden Ring, which is good because they are sort of a light in the dark when it comes to video games from software. I played Armored Core 6. That was very good. Elden Ring, I got a little tired of open world games after Breath of the Wild and how many games like that came out afterwards. But I like Sekiro, so something more sort of on rails, story-based, easier to digest. Sekiro is amazing. That was probably the last video game that I really got into. And like Todd, I played Civ, Age of Empires. I played some battle royales like Apex Legends momentarily. Fun concept, but there's other things going on there now, which I'm sort of out of it. But yeah, I think that covers it for me right now.
All right. We have BF for the win. There seems to be diverging opinions regarding the medium-term future of America in this thing of ours. There's the decline into pseudo-feudal society technologically in all sides, which I largely think you have been on in the past, and the more techno-optimistic side, where white boys will conquer first America and then space via PayPal Mafia aligned. Do you think this economy is broadly correct? And so what side do you think is more correct? Yeah. Basically, the first one is, we could say Uncle Ted, and the second one is Daddy Elon. And that does seem to be one way you could parse out this space. The problem is, if you go with again, the Daddy Elon perspective, it's just completely fatuous. I've said this many places, many times before. If you look at the claims of futurists about where we would be scientifically in, say, 10 years, 50 years, they're always wrong. Look at people from the 50s talking about the year 2000. I mean, 2000 was so wildly divergent from what they were predicting in very substantive ways that it's just risible that anybody could think that was real. Another good example would be, say, in the last 10 years. We went from people, listening to Ray Kurzweil saying we'd all live forever being uploaded into computers to, governments considering rolling out assisted suicide programs, for example, as Canada's already done with their MAID initiative. So there's a sense in which technology profits are always wrong. And we never seem to get any closer to these high goals that they're talking about. Other goals get achieved, but those aren't the ones we're supposed to be looking at, about control and manipulation and all that. And I'll just reiterate briefly, since there's no need to get back into the theory of collapse again. There's no energy for this. I don't know where Elon Musk hopes to find this energy. All major resources, all energy sources are hitting EROI issues: coal, oil, natural gas. And for those that believe in nuclear, even that would be affected by this, because how do you get the uranium out of the ground? 80-ton earth mover trucks, which need gas. You're not going to use an EV on that. So we have a problem. There's just no energy source. That's why I think there's so many people that have this utopian wish for 0-point energy or cold fusion, which, again, we never get closer to. They've been saying we've been around the corner from those things for 50 years now. It's a long corner. And I would say that the collapse people have sometimes overstated the case in order to generate clout and attention. And that has led to a lot of black eyes. I mean, a perfect example would be you have James Howard Kunstler talking about peak oil, and he made some predictions about when it would happen, and it didn't happen when he said it would. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but he looks bad. It just looks bad when you do that. Or when you have Paul Ehrlich, making bets about commodity prices that don't pan out by 1990. Well, the kinds of things he's talking about won't happen in a decade. It'll happen over decades. And so, yeah. But overall, though, if we look at America as it stands now, where is it more? Is it more like what the techno-futurists are saying, or is it more like what the Uncle Ted says? I think we know which way it's going. And also with the techno-optimistic side, as you pointed out, there's literally no way for these quote unquote, white boy summer anons to take over. What are they going to do? Do the long march of the institutions all over again? I mean, they're already the people that have done that are already watching, and furthermore, time is running out. There just isn't the time to do that again. So, Atard, is there anything you want to add to this question?
No, it's sort of not something I think about as much as you do. I have other interests, but thanks for asking.
Okay, then we have CMUS333. What music or art do you most appreciate and why? Well, music, that's easy for me. Classical, I love classical music. Now, classical music can mean one of two things. Narrowly speaking, it's like a period of the 18th century where you think of, like, say, Mozart. But more broadly, it encompasses what we might call four periods: the Renaissance, the classical, the romantic, and then the modern, which is still ongoing. And yeah, that big umbrella term classical is my favorite form of music. But I also like folk music. I also like power metal. I like Sabaton and Blind Guardian and others. Mm-hmm. And then why? Well, in the case of power metal, because it's the only modern music where you find heroic themes. They're not really present anywhere else. And so that's, a lot of people like music because of the lyrics and the content. Classical, also that's why I like folk music. There's certain kinds. It's, again, they have certain messages, certain ideas they're trying to communicate that I like. And then classical is just a complex form of music, which is like exploring a whole vast continent all in itself. So to the music part, Taylor, is there anything you want to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Power metal is great because it has a lot of analogies to classical, at least in my opinion. You mentioned power metal, Dragon Force. Dragon Force is amazing. Mm-hmm. I love them. But I'll list some artists. One of my favorite artists right now has been Philip Glass for a while. The solo piano artist, more or less, did soundtracks. Einstein on the Beach, kind of did some weird stuff, but I just like the piano. Really anything solo piano, classical, massive hit with me. I like some ambient stuff, like William Basinski. Water music is good. And then there's the Disintegration Loops. I can't remember who that artist was. Might have been him still. But there was an indie rock band out of Dayton, Ohio that was really good. I listened to it for a long time when I was younger. Guided by Voices. They were quite good, but I don't listen to a lot of music the way I used to when I was younger. It's very narrowed in towards like the classical, minimalist. Music for 18 Musicians is one of my favorite albums of all time. Minimal classical. So it's very narrowed in right now. I used to listen to a lot more, but as I get older, it's just there's so much that doesn't matter as much as it used to. Classical's great. I love almost all classical.
Now, a great modern composer is Arvo Part. He's really good. He's done a lot of really good stuff. Yes. And I think he still does some stuff. I mean, it's relatively recent, like the 21st century.
Wait, hasn't he passed away?
Oh, has he?
I thought he might have.
Okay, I'm not sure.
But he did stuff quite recently.
Well, I mean, relatively recently compared to, like, say, a Beethoven or something, right?
Yeah, in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah. And the other thing I also like is some of the post-rock bands like Yankee OXO, Godspeed You Black Emperor. That was an excellent album.
Yeah, that album was really good.
That was really good. Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned art. That's kind of an open-ended question, so I'm just going to move it into, because there's a lot of things you can pack into art. Well, I love literature, and of course everybody knows I love Tolkien and Lewis, so that's definitely one thing that I enjoy. Architecture. I enjoy architecture, especially like the classical style, which you see in a lot of like the early buildings in Washington, D.C. or like colonial or Tudor style for housing. So yeah, those are things that I appreciate as well.
Yeah, Lloyd Wright, I think he was an architect, passed away now. I think he was quite good.
Oh, and also the Art Deco, the early 20th century stuff is pretty good too for architecture. Okay, so that was all the people who did community posts.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you for that. So let's go to the chat, see if we got any direct questions here. We have Chase Harrison. What are some of your hobbies outside of the topics that you feature on YouTube? Well, one of them is, there's a lot we can do with this one. So one of them is, of course, getting coffee. I love getting coffee. I just get coffee, go to coffee shops, hang out. That was something I used to do in college, but then, life got really hard and I kind of gave up on that for a while. And then my brother helped remind me, hey, this is like, you need to go to coffee shops. And in sociology, that's what's called a third place. Where you actually meet people. Because, I forget the exact order, but there's first and second places which refer to work and your home. And you don't really socialize in those places. Homes used to be places of social activity in the past, but not anymore. Not on the scale that they used to be. So it's really at third places. And so it's partly due to my brother here that I rediscovered that love of going to coffee shops.
I held on to it. Yeah.
Yeah, he held on to it.
Yeah, we're espresso connoisseurs. We love to find the best espresso in the area, like travel short distances to find it. And we're just, because, you saw the lattes on the Twitter. Like after that, we went for a short walk and went back and got just, we each got a double shot of espresso. And we'll get that as much as we get, the lattes. We'll enjoy coffee for, it's at its most core aspect. Absolutely.
So I also love walking and hiking as well. But one of the other really big hobbies that I've been developing over the few years and that Tyler's been doing for quite a bit longer is working out. So since that's more your wheelhouse, Tyler, you can talk about that a little bit and how you could develop your theory about it and how you've applied it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I need to speak up too because someone said I was quieter. I recently got sick, and so I lost my voice, and everything's still coming back. When I was 20, I'm 33 right now. I was trained in Olympic weightlifting, and that's how I started. I was getting out of shape, and I found a family friend to help me out. And I also got into martial arts after that, Taekwondo, and ended up getting my black belt. And through that was sort of my college experience. I didn't have the money to go to school, so I used that to sort of, I had a lot already innately in terms of like understanding how to work out and what form was and how to get better and how to increase weight. And the Taekwondo training was pivotal for that and helping like crystallize everything that I innately knew from a child. And right now, I am in love with clubs and maces. You can see behind me, there are 2 kettlebells. Those are close to 200 pounds each. A mistake in shipping, I got 2, which was really nice. But yeah, there's a mace right there between the kettlebell and the boots. But yeah, clubs and maces sort of got rediscovered in the past maybe 10 to 20 years through the help of people like Joe Rogan and his company On It selling their own maces. There's a lot better options out there now. But clubs and maces are super ancient. They go back to ancient Persia. They go back to Iran, India, and it's how ancient wrestlers trained and how warriors trained to wield weapons in combat. And it's sort of like an ancient. Mark Wildman is a great resource on YouTube who talks about this, and on Instagram talks about how it's sort of ancient Olympic weightlifting, and a lot of people, like the problem with these is that first people got them and started doing functional weightlifting with them. They just do normal things. But there is a swing that is sort of comparable to complexity of like the kettlebell snatch or any kind of Olympic weightlift with a barbell. So clubs and maces have been awesome for the past 5 or 6 years. And that's how I got Todd started, because it's such an easy thing to get anybody started on who doesn't have a background in weightlifting. I love kettlebells too. Kettlebell snatch is one of my favorite exercises of all time. The swing is amazing if you have something heavy like I do over here. So maces, clubs, kettlebells are my main thing. And I have calisthenics and yoga on top of that. And I have Todd do all of those things off and on as he can. But yeah, I know I could go on forever talking about weightlifting and the philosophy and the science. And George Hackenschmidt, this is the last thing I'll add to it. He, old bro science, wrestler, weightlifter in the early 1900s. Amazing guy. His book, his philosophy of weightlifting is perfect. And one of the funniest things he's ever said is that you should never work out past the point of sweating, which doesn't make sense until you get to sort of a certain level of like adeptness. It makes sense when you get to a certain point of strength and you're not a beginner, and it only makes sense when you get more advanced. But it's very weird, very cool stuff, and I'll finish it up with that.
Okay, that's good. The other thing too, there's a hobby, we kind of mentioned it already in the earlier question, is the idea of listening to music. Again, I listen to a lot of music as well, so that was a good question. So we got some more people in the chat. Hamad Hanif, happy birthday, brother Todd. Well, thank you. Death Culture, thanks for bringing on Masonius Rufus. Yes. Happy birthday. Oh yeah, well, thank you for reaching out to me on Buy Me a Coffee and then hitting me up. So, and giving me his contact info because I had lost it. Okay, let's see. Chase Harrison, birdwatching has been a hobby of mine since early childhood, and since the early 2010s, I've noticed a stark decline in diversity of species I encounter in my home area, Central Texas. Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. The other thing that I've noticed more immediately is the idea of like the insect die-off. Like I remember when I was a kid, like 10, and not just insects, but amphibians. It used to be like tadpoles, we call them mud guppies. They were everywhere. There used to be spring peepers everywhere. There used to be mosquitoes everywhere, which was a bad thing, and then fireflies everywhere. And I just see so few of those anymore. So I think all of these species in areas where humans have a high density of habitation are suffering.
Yeah, I recently had a job where I was driving between states, and I would still hit bugs, but it was so much less than it used to be when I was younger in the 90s and early 2000s. So they're still there, but they're like 70% less. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's dark. Mass Creations broadcast. Do I need to repost my questions to the community tab too? No, you don't. That community tab question, MCB, was to people who maybe couldn't make it tonight, but had some questions that they wanted the AMA to get. So anything you ask here, I'll get to.
And then I referenced you earlier. I think I got pneumonia.
Witticism TV, happy birthday. It was also a pleasure meeting you at the Old Glory Club event. Thank you. Ryan Young, happy birthday. Not me, not you. Happy birthday, dude. It was also a pleasure meeting you at the Old Glory Club event. Again, let's see. Last, Engie, what got you into YouTube and why do you make videos? I watched you when you held the Fall of the Skeptics show back when. Well, the really short answer is in 2016, and even earlier, I was putting ideas which were just not going to have any traction anywhere in the real world. The only place they could possibly gain traction would be online. And for a variety of reasons, YouTube was the most convenient and easy way for me to get started. And at that time, it was just more of a hobby, just a way to sort of like think out loud and just have it available for people who might be interested in it. Let's see. Youth in Asia, metalcore is my guilty pleasure.
Philip Glass.
Same as Aofi. Philip Glass is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Excellently great taste from you too. Thank you.
Seamus, my favorite song I think is Wichita Vortex Sutra. Not because of the relation with the poet who had his poem to go with it, and also Mad Rush, stuff like that. Amazing.
Arthur Jones, happy birthday, Todd. Well, happy birthday. Muhammad Hanif, brother Todd, I as a Muslim have benefited a lot from your content and would love to see Muslim-Christian engagement in constructive spaces such as yours. May Allah keep you blessed. Well, thank you, Muhammad. That's a very nice sentiment.
Salam.
Youth in Asia, bring back the salon. Yes. Same as Seofi, Sun and Steel. Yes.
Yes.
You want to say anything about
Sun and Steel? Sure. Yeah, I love Sun and Steel. I've skimmed it, gone through it real fast. I remember some really good snippets. I talked about how he had to break free of the clutches of the night on him, and how he had to go outside and work out and just shed the night. And the night was a cruel mistress. And the sun's I'm sun right now. A little too much sun right now. I'm putting olive oil on to help get over it, but I'll be fine soon. But yeah, you have to work outside, and it's the best way. I mean, the people at Venice Beach, Arnold, they all had the right idea. Besides the other things they were using to get bigger, but they had the right idea.
Mass creation broadcast. I mean, no offense, but Charlie has the physiognomy of someone who loves drinks lattes.
Oh no, it's my mustache should be big enough to break beyond that mold.
HCBJ, Mr. Fellow, ever write a book? You're one of my favorite living thinkers, and happy birthday. Well, thank you. At some point, I think I will write a book, but part of the one major limiting factor up to this point has been what I want to say hasn't. What I want to write about and what I want to say is going to be the result of a fully formed idea, set of concepts, and general perspective on the world, as sort of like the classic philosophical treatment you get from someone like a Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas or Kant. And I really haven't been there yet, though I think I'm getting close to having all of that put together. I mean, for example, Kant didn't start writing until like his 40s, philosophy-wise. Muhammad Hanif. We recently engaged on Twitter and talked a bit about Paul Virillo. Would love to see you delve into his thought on technique. Lewis Mumford is another great thinker I would love to know your thoughts on. Well, I don't know if Virillo has anything translated in English. When I heard about Paul, I looked into some stuff, and I couldn't really find anything easily accessible by him. Mumford is great. If you've watched any of my videos with Derek Jensen, he brings up Mumford all the time. I'd have to be more familiar with Mumford to speak with him with the familiarity that I do with, say, an Ellul or an Illich or someone like that.
Euthanasia. You're doing club work for stick fighting and martial arts too. You probably know about Mark Wildman then. Let's see.
North Sea. Good evening and happy birthday. Thank you, Yiz. Happy birthday, friend. Thank you, Yiz. It's great seeing you at the Low Glory Club event as well. John Brown, happy birthday, Todd. Well, thanks, John Brown. Let's see. Yiz the Eunuch, I can't stay, but I wanted to pop in live and wish Todd happy birthday. See y'all tomorrow.
Thank you, Yiz.
See you, Yiz. Thanks. Oh, mass creation broadcast. I meant the questions I sent you on DMs. So you're talking about Discord DMs or Facebook DMs? Or X DMs, because there's a lot of DMs I've been getting. Probably Discord. So let me see. Oh, here we go. I see it. Mass creation broadcast. I'll get to these right now. I was thinking that I don't remember you defining what the right is. I have my own version when I'm done with LIPM1. I will have 2 chapters touching on different aspects of it. And the second thing would be if you can go on making more content on escaping the machine in parallel societies, also going over potential real-life updates, dialogues with people locally who help you not to be dependent on it. This could be expanded in future months and years to talking to people who do the same elsewhere and what they discovered. Maybe a third thing, what are your thoughts on what the right needs to do to push culture? Because almost all of its famous attempts in the past 2 to 3 years have been the previous stage of the simulation, but making fun of the left. For example, what I responded to in this, and it's a Twitter that says, I'm bringing it up now. Well, that's loading.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Euthanasia. I think you got my name wrong. There's another question we'd get to in the meantime.
Oh, with euthanasia?
He mentioned Alex. My name's Tyler. He asked me what I got out of martial arts.
Let me see if I can find it.
There we go. Yeah, because there's no one else in here named Alex, I don't think. I got real quick, because we're already on something else. I picked up sort of a discernment because when you're learning things as complex as kicks and forms, there's sort of like an inner body logic that you gain, and this logic is the same across all different ways of weightlifting and martial arts. There's an inner logos like logic, and you can apply that to everything. Like you can take that black belt knowledge that you gain and like learn kettlebells, clubs, maces, calisthenics. You just learn the inner logic of form, and you can just move very quickly from thing to thing and start at an above average level in a lot of things.
Okay. Well, it's not really loading in the way it was supposed to, but I'll get to your questions though here. So we'll start with your second one. Yeah, I do plan on doing more videos on escaping the machine in parallel societies. I have already begun to talk to some people who have already tried this. For example, Wandering Panda and I did a few videos where he's trying to build his homestead. And hopefully I will be able to talk to him more in the future and to other people. And as far as like on a theoretical level, of course, I've talked to Derek Jensen, who's been writing about this for many years now. How do I define the right? Well, that will be a whole video all on itself. But broadly speaking, the way I would define the right is everything before the French Revolution and industrial civilization. Like there just wasn't a left before that, and the reason why there wasn't a left before that is because everything that existed was fundamentally organic. Even things that were constructed, like states or churches or cities, were themselves growing out of this organic, natural relationship. And when they got, too separated from the organic by this simulacra, they fell much more quickly. There wasn't this constant push like we've seen with technology to get further and further and further away. And the triumph of the left in modern times is tied to the fact that it has tied itself to this. And the left is just essentially trying to figure out what social norms can exist within this new current state of the meta in the machine. That's the TLDR version, though. Of course, I will probably do a video at some point on what is right and what is left. And then, what it needs to do to push culture. I mean, the problem is, what is culture? And I did do a couple of videos on what is culture last year, especially one on culture and simulacra. Culture is the product of an organic, lived community, which we just don't have anymore. So really, the first thing the right needs to do is figure out how to do that again. A perfect example of like cultural feedback loop is Mussorgsky, the Russian composer of the 19th century. At the end of his New World Symphony, he's inspired by aspects of Negro spirituals, which again, that's an organic culture of the African American community. Also, you have his Slavonic dances, which are a kind of like gussied up version of dances that were being done throughout Russia and Austria-Hungary for centuries. These kinds of things just don't exist anymore. So the high art version, Mussorgsky's appropriation of them, can't really happen unless you just want to go. The only thing you could do right now is go back to already existing cultural artifacts in like literature and music that represented something real and just keep riffing off of it until we have our own communities again. So sorry about missing that mass creation broadcast. Let's see here. Okay, he did that. Okay, I did cover that. Seamus Iofi. Mad Rush was my introduction to him and my favorite to this day. Super awesome.
It is amazing.
Seamus Iofi. Is this the same brother who referenced when you brought up Mishima v. Lovecraft defeating the fungus? Yes.
Nice.
Yes. All right, so we have a super chat. Let's get to this first. For $5 US, Foxflaw, thank you so much. Thank you so much for appreciating my question, answering my question. I hope the new Civ isn't poisoned. Oh, you mean 7? Yeah, I just saw the update for that. Appreciate your brother taking on games, and Armored Core 6 was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Youth in Asia. Any hope for the History of Warfare series to return? It was my favorite and an intro into your channel. I don't know. I have to get a hold of I'm trying to remember his name now. It's been a while. Terminal Philosophy. We've been out of touch for a while, so I'll have to. And when we were not doing it, we both had a hard time making time. So we'll have to see if he's interested in doing that again. But yeah, it was a good series. Mohammed Hanif, thoughts on Rene Guénon? I don't really know much about Rene Guénon, so I can't really say much about him. Euthanasia, Tyler. Sorry, my bad. Haha, I missed the name the first time.
It's okay. I think I've had Alex before for some reason. I must look like one.
Melon, happy birthday. Well, thank you. Okay, go ahead and read that one, Tyler, right?
Let's see. I know what you mean. My favorite part of working with the body is learning how it moves on a muscle to muscle order. Yeah, it's really weird. Like I read a lot of, Eastern philosophy books, like maybe The Unfettered Mind by Takwan Soho, Book of Five Rings, Musashi, and then you've got Yagi Munenori, who wrote Life-Giving Sword. And I think this is all Zen Buddhism, basically. And they talk about how you can know the 10,000 things from one thing. And I mean, I read that in my teens, and I was like, all right, well, what if that's true? You can just know many things from one thing. And you just go into a martial art or any kind of modality with that idea in mind. and you can learn how to do other things from one thing. It can happen. It helps believing. I mean, I think it'll happen either way, because you can sort of be forced into adopting some pretty weird ideas, either religious or spiritual, from learning how the body works and just being fit in general. It does weird things to how you think about the world.
All right, Chase Harrison, what, if any, potential solutions do either of you see for attempting to regain a higher level of trust within U.S. society? Well, and in the near term, I don't really see much choice. I think what will inevitably cause there's only really two things I could see causing high trust. One would, of course, be the natural decline into a lower energy state where material conditions dictate social conditions, in which case people just have to. Otherwise, you just won't. Otherwise, you'll die. Now, that's like the hard way to do it. The only way that I could see it where it's not hard is if there's some sort of philosophical or spiritual movement or revival that leads to a transformation of individuals so that they experience some level of ego death and work for the good of a community. I'm not saying it won't happen, but the other one looks a lot more certain. Tyler, that was directed at you too.
All right, let's see. Oh, I was checking on the chat. Otherwise, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll come back to that one.
Okay. Chase Harrison. I know often the homogeneity and shared cultural backdrop are typical answers given when discussing topics like this, but does anything else stick out in your mind as a way of moving forward in this way? Well, I'm just going to push back on that. Like, ethnic homogeneity doesn't mean anything. Like, we've grown up with basically, white European people our entire lives, and there's just no solidarity. There's plenty of people that slip through the cracks. I mean, yes, that is important, all things considered, but we live in such a distorted perspective that doesn't even work. You could also look at like East Germany. Yeah, they're all Germans, but I mean, do you want to live in East Germany? No, there's something more at stake here. Mass creation broadcast. I've met multiple people who define the right in terms of what the left is. Oh, I'm not like the left. Right, that's the problem. The left was initially defined as not being the right, but now it's switched due to technological realism. John Brown, what do you guys think of the debate? Well, I didn't really watch it, and I had a really good tweet, which I will share and read it after you give your perspective on the debate, Tyler.
Yeah, so I watched like the last hour of it, and it was just a YouTuber laughing at it as well. And it was great. I thought I came in, and I can't remember where exactly this happened, but they were talking about golf and how much better they were at golf than the other guy. And I thought that was amazing. Like, that was a real, true debate. Whether or not you could beat the other guy in golf. I thought that was great. And I saw memes too talking about how this was the Chad homonym debate, where it's just like, no, screw you. You're terrible. You're a bad person. You lie. And it's like, no, I'm better at golf than you are. It's just, I thought that was hilarious. I mean, it was great, but it was horrible. But it was so bad it was good. And it was the Chad homonym. If you've seen that meme on Twitter, it was perfect.
All right, so just briefly, this tweet blew up yesterday. America of 2024 is not a country. A TV entertainer is running against a dementia patient. America is full simulacra, which another way of saying is nothing. All that it really is the material constructs of techno-capital. Madness will be irresistible when the veil is lifted. So that's my thought on the debate. I didn't care to watch it at all. Let's see. Mass creation broadcast. What are your thoughts on the butter olive oil discourse? Except Along against seed oils. If you remember, you're an animal fats guy. I mean, olive oil is good and butter is good. Like, I don't really. I mean, olive oil would be more of a Mediterranean thing naturally, but we have a global economy, so we can like ship it around the world. If you're living in North America without a global supply chain, you're just going to be having butter, which is fine.
Got tallow, ghee.
Yeah, tallow and ghee as well.
Yep.
Those are good. Animal fats. That's probably the best thing to use. I mean, butter's good. And olive oil is not so much for cooking. It's more like for dipping things in, like bread.
Yeah, and for skin as well. I would say skin topical is probably the best use for it. I think the Greeks were, I mean, they ate it, of course, but I mean, they were really on top of things with the topical.
Euthanasia. I've been getting into Hermetic philosophy recently. Do you have any opinions on it? I think it ties in somewhat. Wait, I just missed it. Ties in somewhat you were saying in response to my comment earlier, Tyler. Well, I think it's to both of us, but I mean, Hermetic philosophy, again, Hermes thrice great, Hermes Trismegistus from Egypt, is sort of like what I would put it in the perspective is if we look at the biblical context, it would be like the magicians of Egypt and Pharaoh. And that they're on to something, but they're using it for these darker purposes. And I think that Hermeticism is actually the cause of all of this technological nonsense. There's a book called Fire in the Minds of Men by Billington, who was a 33rd degree Freemason who ran, I think during the Clinton administration, the Library of Congress, where he points out that all of this Hermetic nonsense, the Freemasons and the Illuminati, gave rise to radical revolutionaries like Marx.
Yeah. Recently, I've read the Kybalion, and I've read it in the past too. And the Kybalion is sort of the Hermes Trismegistus text, and it has the principles, the 7 principles. And I'm not super in love with Hermetic philosophy in certain regards. It's a huge topic to get into, but there's some issues with it. Like Todd said, it's sort of tied into Freemasonry and Illuminati, and it's. I don't want to insult it, but sometimes it's like I'm 14 and this is deep kind of level of understanding. And in general, when you read the relevant parts of the Bible that talk about like Hermetic kind of ideas, or one of my favorites is in the Bhagavad Gita, huge Gita enjoyer, talks about how God is not this like generative process, because like a lot of people want to say that everything is just, sex. And, it's just a generative principle. Everything is just generative principles over and over and over. And the Gita talks about that being sort of like delusional in a way. And I think he says it nicer, but I mean, he comes in hard on a lot of things.
Well, and the Masons really into that hard. You get that a lot with Mackey, the 19th century Mason, who wrote like the Encyclopedia of Masonry. So yeah, that degraded principle is predominant. Here, this one's for you, Tyler.
Okay. Starting strength, Mark Repito, based or cringe. 5x5, like that general idea, is good until you plateau. And everybody plateaus at the exact same numbers, like give or take 5, 10, 20 pounds. And then you've got to get really creative. And this is funny because like on YouTube Fitness, you're not going to find many channels that talk about like high intermediate to advanced weightlifting, because you really can't put these things down to paper or video very well. But you can talk about the basics forever. And, Mark Repito, he'll say things like, there's no plateau that you can't out-eat. And, being in love with the barbell lifts that much, eating that much just to get past plateaus, you're going to turn into a refrigerator. Yeah, you'll be massive, but, you're going to have a price to pay for it. You want to be a refrigerator. 5x5, just adding 5 pounds a week or whatever it is, like plateau central. Like you'll bench 225 and then, or 200 to 225, and then you'll just stop. You'll get to like 250, 260 squat, and you'll just be dead in the water. Deadlift, you'll be able to deadlift maybe more easily, just adding 5 pounds a week, doing Mark Repito and just eating a lot. But deadlifts do not do much for you past a certain point. Like they're fun. And they sort of they're sort of like, it's like a runner's high in the sense that, yeah, it makes you feel really, really good when you can deadlift that much and you get a runner's high sort of effect. And I mean, that doesn't really do anything. You don't need to feel that good about, what you're doing.
Okay, we have another super. Jimin's 31 for 10 US dollars. Thank you. We'll watch later, but wanted to wish you happy birthday. Thanks for the informative content you provide. You're welcome.
Thank you, Jimin's.
Let's see here. You have some more. Corbin, are we seeing increased levels of innovation from Russia and China? How might Russia and China and India deal with the realities of global demographic change and the hereditary components of IQ? Well, I mean, and only in some niche areas like weapon systems like missiles and, well, mostly missiles, primarily ballistic missiles, but also with cruise missiles. Drones, Iran is doing quite well. China is doing quite well, but also so is Turkey, a U.S. ally for now. And they've sold a lot of their Bayraktar drones to Ukraine. But, the kinds of technological innovations that we were supposed to have had by 2024, if we looked at any of the science fiction predictions of the 80s, are just not coming. And I don't think that Russia, China, or India are going to invent past this wall. There's still this hard wall, this limit to innovation, which, I get that from John Michael Greer and James Howard Kunstler and Joseph Tainter in large part. And I think they might do a little bit better in the short term just because they're not actively waging war on their own population like the United States is. But demographic collapse will hit India and China quite hard because they're vast countries and they're going to lose a lot of people. It's not going to be easy for anyone, though for an authoritarian regime like Russia and China, it might be easier to manage because you can ram through harsh measures in a way that a democratic country would have a much harder time like the US or India. Let's see.
John Brown?
Yeah, John Brown. I was laughing too. Is he so senile? Yeah, he is.
Yeah, well, just about the debate again, the articles today were over Twitter talking about how there's this decades-long kitchen cabinet that surrounds the White House and Biden that's going to decide whether or not he can, keep going or he has to drop out. And they were Axios, they were using the word oligarchy. And sometimes it got edited out like, a couple hours later. But big oligarchy, decades-long kitchen cabinet vibes surrounding Biden. And it was just interesting to see them saying that in the articles. That was wild. Mass
creation broadcast. Who should be the first American king, or has he not been born yet? Well, I question the premise there should be an American king, but yeah, maybe he already has been born. Uh-huh. But mass creation broadcast again. Do you plan on learning ancient languages, Greek, Latin, to read the wisdom before the machine in the original versions? They change a bit how you interact with the meaning of the text. That certainly is the case, and in an ideal situation where education was not garbage, you would be learning Greek and Latin, so you could do that. If the time and the opportunity arises, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, because that would definitely improve my ability to engage.
English is a great language too. I think it's better than people give it credit for. And it was Jorge Luis Borges who said that English was his favorite language to write in.
Polish ambassador. Captain Harlock is an anime version of Idiocracy in which earthly politicians are competent solely and exclusively in the subject of golf, and all the soldiers are taking their leave on demand during the invasion of Earth.
Nice. Nice.
Cody Bassett, happy birthday. Thank you. Chase Morrison, any thoughts on Peter Soltajic? I've never heard of him, so no.
Yeah, no.
Stephen Malcolm, the deadlift is the best exercise of all.
No. It's okay.
Let's see.
It's pull-ups or push-ups.
Muhammad Hanif, in Islamic eschatology, there is a return to the primitive forms of warfare near the end times. Are there similar ideas in Christianity as well? Since Kalat seems near, doesn't it make it more probable? Well, okay, as far as anybody but myself, I can't say, because if you take Ezekiel 37 and 38 to refer to the Magog and Gog as some sort of antichrist invasion of the Holy Land at that time, they end with burning all these chariots. And there's other elements of the Battle of Armageddon that they mention chariots in Revelation, which, if you want to take them literally, would indicate that we have to get beyond this technological civilization. Attempts to transliterate that as euphemisms for modern tanks, it's just unconvincing on the face of it. But other than myself, I don't know of anyone who takes that position. But yeah, that's definitely a very plausible one in light of collapse. North Sea. Do you ever follow Stephen Su and the Manifold podcast for information on what China is up to? I do not. And I have my own resident China expert, Rain, who was on a few days ago, giving some really excellent takes. You should definitely check his appearances out. He does have a YouTube channel, which I linked to, but not a whole lot of content yet. Okay, Youth in Asia, thanks for the response. I'm mostly liking the mentalism parts of Hermetics and its relation to some Eastern thought on the mind and body and uniting them together.
Yeah, that's one principle that's not it's not the worst out of all of them. No, there's some bad ones in there, but all is mind, it's hard not to like that one the most, I think.
Jay Ford, pleasure meeting you again at the Old Glory Club event. Glowing and Oin. Thank you. Those are the two who work from the Hobbits.
Nice.
They're brothers. Happy birthday, BTW. Thank you. Mass creation broadcast. I speak Spanish to God, Italian to women, French to men, German to my horse, Charles V.
That's good.
Right, but then the German horse kicked Charles off his throne with Martin Luther, so be careful. Let's see. Mass creation broadcast. You plan on making a website which is not on Substack? I have a few ideas for easier organizing and networking. I have not at the moment, though I wouldn't say I would rule that out entirely. This is sort of like try as you go right now. North Sea, yes, Rain was great. Yeah, he's excellent.
Back is the best muscle group. I think that or legs. It's hard. Yeah.
Chase Harrison, I remember you mentioning in a previous podcast with Keith that you thought Andrew Jackson is the running for the greatest American president. Is this due chiefly to his opposition of the Fed? Yeah, almost entirely. I mean, the Fed is like primeval in America, where the banking system just was taking over. And that's the main reason why I consider that. Because, a lot of people will talk about the American system, American democracy, American principles, American values, and fighting for them. But very few people correctly identify who or what is threatening that system, and then B, do anything about it. Jackson did both. And he basically threw all of his political capital into it. Now, I think he might have served 2 terms, and this was before the limitation after FDR, so he theoretically could have run more. But he took that principled stand and shut down the monster. So, props. That's the main reason. No, of course he had blemishes on his record, like the Cherokee removal from Georgia to Oklahoma. But then, okay, so what? I mean, FDR had prison camps for German and Japanese. So, I don't see people crying crocodile tears about that. It's looking at what he did for the American system and people. Chase Harrison, or other reasons you cite for this perspective as well? Primarily that one. That just was so huge. Let's see. Mass creation broadcast. What question do you want to answer? AKA, what do you want to tell us as your audience unprompted? You want me to ask you guys? You could always make recommendations for future content you'd like me to cover. And in some sense, there's been a lot of that already.
Well, I think he means like soapbox. Like, what question do you wish they answered? Or wish they asked that you could answer right now?
I see. That's how you're constructing it. That's an interesting question. I kind of was going into this just kind of like loosey-goosey, just waiting to see what people were going to throw at me. It wasn't so much that I had a specific, other than just generating more engagement. I didn't have a specific goal in mind other than that. And that just meant talking about what the audience was asking me. Now, I do have some things that are not questions, but I had prepared them in case there was a lot of dead air, which thankfully there wasn't. We had a lot of great engagement tonight, guys. But I do have a few things to talk about as far as future streams for the rest of the year, future ideas and concepts that I'm going to explore. One of them is I want to do a basics of metaphysics video where I talk about some of the most fundamental principles of metaphysics, such as causation, how and why that proves that there's one God. X with steps is bad. X with steps is a euphemism where if you can go from point A to point B in just one jump and there's no need to add steps, why would you add steps in the first place? And this both has implications for philosophy and religion. Eliminates the steps because they're unnecessary. Okay, so that's one concept I want to flesh out. Socialism is a right-wing reaction to techno-capital. That's another one I want to flesh out. There's a lot of deep lore that, in part, Logos and I have been nibbling on the edges, and so has Keith Preston. And he's mentioned there was a book called The Lost Literature of Socialism by, I'm looking it up now. That didn't work. Let's see. Lost. George Watson, where he argues that if you actually read the early 19th century socialists and Marxists, they basically are right-wing. And they're sort of like a red Tory reaction to capitalism. And he means like right-wing in the sense of like more of these cultural things. Logos and I will plan on talking about that some as well. So that's an idea that I started to push at the Glory Club as well. And there's more on that to come. Also, a follow-up to my discussion on mental illness and madness, where I'll explore some of these ideas. Physical trauma, and in this case I use war, so exposure to bombs, missiles, mines, and poison gas, can lead to damaging or lethal mental effects. In World War I, that was called shell shock. Today, that's called PTSD. If since it is possible that physical stimuli can create mental or spiritual effects, it follows that mental and spiritual events can cause the same level of traumatic marks in a man's mind or spirit. This is how the coming madness will emerge. It would lead to levels of mental and spiritual trauma previously associated with war and shell shock, but will have little obvious external stimuli. Modern man has been playing with a Ouija board and got a lot more than he bargained for. So that'll be probably more than one episode, but there'll be one episode to like introduce this idea. Logos and I plan on a series of streams to flesh out and develop my OGC talk, or rather the themes contained in it. There was a lot of great engagement during the event and then after the event with the Old Glory Club itself, their YouTube channel. Did a recap of the whole event. Some kind words were said about my speech. And then Dave the Distributist on his channel did one as well. And Logos and I were like, yeah, we definitely need to follow up on this and start exploring those themes that were in the speech and to help clarify it to others who still have questions. Some talk about the Trinity. Again, this is going to sound like pretty hard to follow, and I'll explain this in future episodes. God the Father possesses a deity and exists necessarily in himself. The Father is logically but not temporally prior to the Son and Spirit. The Son and Spirit do not possess a deity. They cannot possibly not be, since they are eternally proceeding from the Father. The God is still of one substance as the Son, and the Spirit proceed necessarily from the Father and existed before creation. Because, of course, before creation, only God existed. That will be future discussion. Logos and I were about to do that, like maybe in February or March of this year, but things on my end just didn't work out. I'll talk a little bit more about the theory of war. I know somebody, I think it was Euthanasia, brought up my History of Warfare series with, hold on a second here, with terminal philosophy, but the idea of two things. Because I first learned this principle from studying warfare growing up. You abstract a more fundamental concept from concrete observations, physical observations, and the more you abstract, the simpler it gets until you get to basically these simplicity in the form of axioms. You don't go beyond them; they just are. They're the basic building blocks that you work with, and then cover some basic axioms there. Those are some ideas that I plan on discussing in the future. Let's see.
Just a few more.
I know. Let's see here. Shima Seofi was going to request basics of metaphysics or a vid going over Kant, but looking forward to it. Yeah, Kant's a bit of a challenge. I mean, I could probably do it, but it would take me a while to get familiar with his work. Mohammed Hanif, if you know about Wolfgang Smith, what do you make of his metaphysical interpretations of quantum mechanics? Must look into him if you haven't already. Well, I haven't, so thank you for the recommendation. North Sea, Thomas Carlyle was a socialist, one of the most right-wing thinkers. Yes, exactly. And in fact, Engels directly cites Carlyle for the inspiration of the cash nexus, which is a key doctrine of Marxist theory. It is also quite interesting that Thomas Carlyle, who, as you correctly pointed out, had socialist tendencies, he defended the Chartist movement, which is a working-class movement in early England in the early 19th century. Moldbug doesn't bring any of this up, even though, of course, he's the one that's brought Carlyle back to the fore. It's very interesting. Think about that. Mass creation broadcast. I mean, obviously, the revolution needs its parents, and revolutionaries will be more left-wing, and those who are adults become gearing this once they got what they want. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. I've recently started developing this theory of socialist counter gangs that were created by Wall Street to make the original socialists look bad. That's still pretty germinal in its form, so I haven't really got it out there yet for a large audience. There'll be more to come on that as well. Mohammed Anif, you must do more streams with Kryptos as well. Yes, I definitely should. We've done some good streams on collapse and things like that. So everybody, it's basically an hour. So it was a great stream, a lot of engagement. I think we peaked around 30 viewers. And yeah, thanks for coming out. Thanks for the well wishes. Tali, you want to leave anything with the guests before we end up?
Yeah, no, everyone, thank you for coming out. This was a very fun stream. I loved meeting you all and getting to talk like this. And maybe I'll come around maybe more often or so. Todd and I have got some ideas, so we'll see what happens. And yes, and happy birthday, Todd. Everybody give him some love if you so desire, so please do. Yeah, I think that's it, Todd.
All right. Okay, I'll get one more question in before we wrap up. Mass creation broadcast, expert interviews. Did you stream with women? I don't remember any. I've streamed with Yara Keefe before. She's a colleague of Derek Jensen. And I one time interviewed the president of Secular Pro-Life, who was a woman. That was like 6 years ago, I think.
Ex-vegan?
That was Yara Keefe.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, thank you, everybody. This is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.